Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
If you've listened to this podcast, or if you're listening now, you will hear me say that there is a very close alignment between the notion of networking, building relationships, and leadership. And what I mean by that is that I can't think of anybody that is a good leader that doesn't have a strong network. And I can't think of anybody who's got a strong network that isn't in some way, shape, or form a really strong leader. And I'm not saying they've got to be, captain of the team or president of the chamber or anything like that, but you just see this close alignment. And there is definitely a reason for it. And today we're going to talk about it. I have on as a guest today, retired Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCullough, and he is the author of a book called Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. Oak, welcome to the program.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show, Frank. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. So Oak, I guess you've written this book. Now, I know some people write books just to write books, but this is from your experiences,
Right.
and experiences and observations. Now, you heard my lead in. I guess we will certainly kick that around. But I guess let's start with this. Can you kind of give us your backstory, your origin story? You are a retired lieutenant colonel. You didn't come into the armed services. Thank you for your service, by the way. You didn't come into it as a lieutenant colonel. It built up along the way.
Right.
You are obviously a leader. You obviously have a network. This is going to be fun. So yeah, give us your backstory, if you will.
Yeah, so I grew up in Northern Illinois, which is why I live in Florida, because I'm never going to live through that again. A winter's like that again. So I grew up in a small little farm town, grew up working on farms until I came into the Army. Came into the Army as a second lieutenant and did all the usual jobs. I started as an infantry officer. Then about my captain years, about 5 years in, I switched over to armor, and I was an armored cav officer for the last 18 years. And my last duty assignment, I ran an Army ROTC program. I had lots of leadership positions in there. My last duty assignment, I ran an Army ROTC program. So I was helping to produce the next generation of leaders. And then when I retired, I ran the day-to-day operation of a food bank that covered 52 counties along the Gulf Coast of the United States, from Mississippi to the Panhandle of Florida. And then they offered me to come here to Embry-Riddle and do recruiting for Army ROTC. And I've been doing that for about 12 years now. And then I'm going to retire here in September, end of September, from this job. And I'm just going to concentrate on writing my second book and getting out and speaking as much as I can.
All right, you heard my preview, or the front part of the podcast. Have you ever met somebody who was a good leader, didn't have a network? I mean,
No, absolutely not. Because in the end, two things. Leadership is leadership. So it doesn't matter where you learned it, doesn't matter where you practiced it. It's leadership. And number two is leadership is about people, period. Plain and simple. It's not about flow charts. It's not about organizational charts. It's not about the bottom line. I got it. We got to make money for businesses. But that's not what leadership is about. Leadership is about people, taking care of people.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I had a job, and my one and only job. I was a consultant, and I had a boss, and there were several bosses. It was an accounting for a consulting firm. There were several bosses, and there were some I liked and some I didn't. And I think to a certain extent, when you're in that sort of a situation, people need to be you have people following you because they get a paycheck.
Yep, absolutely.
And when you're in the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, or whatever, people are followed because you have to, right? I mean,
Well, I think there are certain leaders like that in the military who are the authoritarian, micromanaging, do it as I tell you to do. But I think there is those leaders out there like myself and like a bunch of my mentors who I say are selfless leaders, selfless service. It's what it's about. And they're the ones who you follow because you want to, and here's the key. And I think if you go back and you think about the ones that you didn't really like or you didn't like to work for, and the ones you did, the ones that you liked to work for were the ones who took the time to get to know you on a personal level. Now, I got it. You got to keep the boss-worker relationship. But in that, you can still get to know people, because I think that's the key. That's where trust is built. If you take the time to get to know them and to let them know you. And I always tell all the new lieutenants that we commission out of here, one of the ways to build that trust is every day, go out and find one new person in your organization and find out one new thing about them each day. So each day you find one person, you find out one new thing. Tomorrow you find another person, find out one new thing. And not about work, about their personal life. What's their spouse's name? How many kids do they have? What's their names? What sports do they play? Something personal. And then you'll figure out that the trust just starts to grow exponentially because you're proving that you care about them.
Yeah, I definitely think there's certainly some power to that. The bosses that I thought, well, I didn't think. I mean, it was in my heart. You just kind of knew it. There was this gut feeling that they cared about you.
Yeah, you can't fake it.
No, you can't. And I remember having some, business is hard, having a job is hard, careers are hard, and there are bad days. And I remember having bad days and having bosses who would call me on a personal note hey, how you doing? Are you okay? This really, the business, we have to worry about the business and serving the clients, but I'm worried about you.
Yeah.
Let's go have a cup of coffee. I'm worried about you. And I just found myself willing to, I wouldn't say walk through the fires of hell for them, but I would certainly go the extra mile for those people who cared.
Absolutely, you do. Yeah. So I think that the key to that is, because you're absolutely right. I mean, the boss isn't the one that's going to get the business from here to there. It's the people that work for that boss or that leader who are going to make things happen. So you got to make them happy. Now, that doesn't mean you do everything that they want. I always tell people being a servant leader means that sometimes you're going to make people do things that they don't want to do, because whether they know it or not, it's in their best interest to do it. And there's some things you have to do because it's the best interest of the company. Again, we got to make money and all those things. But if you make them happy, or if you make them do the things that they need to do, whether they know it or not, because being a selfless leader doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. It just means that you have their best interest at heart, whether they want to do what they have to do or not. Yeah.
Do you struggle in imparting these leadership? And I'm talking about the students at Emory Riddle, is it? Emory Riddle?
Yes.
Do you struggle getting them to understand these things or getting them to lean into them? Because it's not I don't know that caring for other people is a natural, well, it is a natural thing, but when you're, on the one hand, we're being taught in kind of a business sense, get out there and look out for yourself. And,
right.
And that kind of conflicts with a lot of the things you're talking about.
Some of them pick up on it pretty quickly because they've had leaders who have proved that to them, like I did as a high school student and in my time in the Army. But some of them will say to me, I know that what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, but I want my next promotion. I want my next pay raise. And I said, look, if you do what I'm telling you to do, if you take care of people, you're going to get that promotion. You're going to get that pay raise because your people are going to be better people, and they'll go that extra mile for you. And then that will make your organization better. And in the end, you're going to get the recognition of being a good leader. But you did it for the right reasons. You didn't do it out of greed. You did it because you were taking care of other people, making them the best people they could be. You know, and it goes back to, I get asked all the time, what's my favorite leadership book? And people are shocked when I tell them, because
all right, let's hear it.
It's not a military book.
Okay.
My favorite leadership book is John Wooden on leadership. And the reason is because he understood that it wasn't just about making championship basketball teams. He did.
Yeah.
But the reason he did was because of what we're talking about. He understood that it was about making people, these young men that were playing basketball for him, better people, better citizens, going to be productive in society. Because he understood, as I understand about the military, and I tell these young soon-to-be lieutenants, someday you're going to take the uniform off, one way or the other. So you've got to be prepared to go out there and be a good citizen, a good person, and pass on those lessons to the next generation.
There, you know, speaking of the word generation, there's a lot of, and maybe there's always been this consternation about, oh, this generation, that generation.
Oh, there has. Absolutely.
Do you, and well, I don't want to say my view on it. I want your view. I don't want you to taint it with my view. Do you see a difference between the Gen Z and the Gen X or whatever, our generation, we're about the same age, our generation, and, if so, what are the differences?
Yeah, I think I do. Baby boomers like us, before the internet, before computer games, right, and all that kind of stuff, we spent a lot of time outside. We spent a lot of time doing face-to-face stuff.
Yeah.
So we learned the importance of that. And I think every generation after that has had more technology and more technology and more technology. And the thing that I see a lot is that this generation, I read an article, I don't know, probably about a year ago, mm-hmm, where they said that this current generation of, 15 to 20-year-olds, they consider somebody that they have met online that they've never met in person just as good a friend as somebody who they've met face to face and spend time with. That's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider them a friend or friend them or whatever, but to consider them just as good a friend as somebody you spend time with, that you go to high school with, I think that's one of the things that scares me, is we're losing that face-to-face personal relationship, that this generation is kind of losing that. And that to me, that is so important, that face-to-face, I care about you. I want to get to know you as a person, not just somebody online that I talk to.
I was reading a study the other day, and I think this was out of the UK, this study, but what they're finding is that when we're together with people in person, there's actually there's actually a syncing of brains, and we're not communicating necessarily, but there's a higher level of synchronicity between what's happening in people's brains. And they've measured it with people, doing a Zoom call. This is the second time you and I've talked, and I think we get along great. But it's not at the same level as if we were sitting in a room or having a cup of coffee or something like that.
I agree with that. And I think part of the problem, let's face it, this technology is fantastic. I would never have met you if it hadn't been for this. But one of the things that I always tell young men and women is that when you're in a leadership position, whenever possible, when you're telling somebody what you want done, you should do it in person, because then you can tell whether or not they understand what it is you really want. I mean, if I tell you something over text or email, I don't know if you really receive that or not by your response. If I tell it to you in person, I can look into your eyes and I can generally tell whether or not you're confused or have some questions, or whether or not you understood what I was telling you to do.
Or even how we stand. I mean, you and I here, we're both talking to each other, and the audience can't see it, but we're a couple talking heads.
Yeah.
So I can't see if your hips are turned away from me, what you're doing with your
Arms
hands.
crossed or whatever.
Right. Yeah. All those little things that
Because
are,
body language matters.
it does. It
That
does.
communication is everything. It's verbal and nonverbal. It's all your written communications, which is letters, memos, email, text. It's handwritten notes. I'm a huge believer in handwritten notes. And then the piece that we do very poorly, the listening piece, is part of communications as well. And we don't do a good job as a society of listening.
Yeah, it's interesting. You was talking to a friend, and he was his daughter's off at college, he's got a boyfriend, and he was asking his daughter questions that a dad would ask a daughter about a boyfriend. And it's just, if you've got a daughter, you get it, or kids at all, you get it. And he said, I was totally floored to think she didn't know about it. When I was growing up, we would get on the phone, and corded phone, bolted to the wall, hung around a corner so nobody could hear, and you would talk for hours and talk about all sorts of stuff. And I don't want to say kids these days, because that sounds like I'm an old codger, and I'm not. I don't feel it in my heart. But when you're texting, it's like you're kind of taking a step back from that communication.
Yeah, I agree.
And the emoji doesn't, the laughing emoji doesn't really convey the laughing that you're laughing necessarily, or whatever it is.
That's right. Absolutely, I agree.
So you got a new book coming out. You're going to be working on what's the new book going to be about?
So the second book that I'm going to write, and I haven't started it yet. I'm waiting until I get done with my day job here. It's going to be on the second presentation that I give when I go out and speak. Some people, especially if they bring me back for a second presentation, they'll have me give this one, and it's called How to Be Successful. And let's face it, there are no guarantees of being successful, but there are things you can do to help increase your possibility of being successful. And in that, I talk about how to set goals and how to accomplish goals. I talk a little bit more about communication, like I did in my first book, because I don't care if you're a leader or a follower or whatever you want to do. If you want to be successful, you got to be able to communicate. And then I talk about things like how to develop good habits, self-discipline, how to network, how to build a group of people that can help you. I talk about how finding mentors, because mentors are so important if you want to be successful in whatever you're going to do. So just things about that you can do every day. Again, just like in my book and in my leadership presentation, I don't talk about theory. So I don't talk about theory in either presentation. It's just going to be everyday things that you can do to help increase your possibility of being successful.
Okay. Now, the presentation you do a lot of now, is it based on your book, Your Leadership Legacy?
So the book is based on that presentation.
Oh,
so I
okay.
started giving that leadership presentation back in 2006. And obviously I've added things and updated things, but I've been giving it for a long time. Okay. And I always wanted to write a book about it, and I just never did. And then one day somebody asked me if I'd written a book, because I told him I wanted to be on the speaker circuit and go out and talk to people, as many people as I could. And he looked at me and said, "Have you written a book about it?" And I said, "Well, no, but I'm thinking about it." And he looked at me and said, "Stop thinking about it and write it."
Yeah.
And so I went home that night and I wrote out the table of contents, and that was the 15th of February, 2020. I started writing it the next day, the 16th of February, 2020, and I published it on the 12th of February, 2021. Now, obviously, my presentation in the book, there's about 15 different things that I cover and talk about. Obviously, in a 45-minute to an hour presentation, I can't talk about 15 things. So if somebody has me come speak, I'll send them a list of those 15 things and say, pick 5 of these that you really want me to talk about. And then I'll add 1 or 2 of my own, depending on how long they want me to speak. And that's how the presentation goes. But the book came off of the presentations.
Okay.
And that'll be the same way for the second book. It will come out of the presentation that I give.
Okay. if somebody is looking to get a hold of you, should they go to your website? I'll put the website in the show notes, but I assume you have other social platforms that you're on, LinkedIn,
absolutely,
Instagram.
Frank.
Okay.
So my website, and you'll put the website on there, but it has my cell phone number, my email address. It's got some video clips of me giving my presentation, so you see what it is that you're really going to get when you if you hire me to come talk. And it's got some of the podcasts that I've been on. I think I told you I've been on about 80 podcasts now. Not all of them are on there, but some of them are. And then so you can kind of get an understanding of me and my philosophies and what I talk about. And then I am on the other social media. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on I got a YouTube channel that you can again look at more videos and more podcasts.
No TikTok though.
No, I'm not on TikTok. and I don't plan to be.
Well, if somebody was asking me the same thing, are you on TikTok? I'm like, you know what? There's talk that the federal government's going to, why am I going to invest money or invest time in it? And they probably never will. But there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can do in a day.
Absolutely. And most of my time, I have all those platforms. Really, the only two that I spend a lot of time on, besides LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the number one. I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, but then the second one that I spend the most of my time on is probably Instagram.
Okay. Last question. When this new book comes out, will you come back on the program?
Oh, I would love to come back on your program, Frank. Anytime you want me to come, you just got to ask.
All right. Well, thank you.
I mean, I never turn down a chance to talk to people. I mean, to me, again, this is my passion at this point in my life, is to get out there and talk to as many people as I can about leadership, about how to be successful. And if, like I told you when we were talking before this, and I think I told you the first time we talked, if I help one person when I talk, then it's worth my time.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think it's what you're doing is great. You're leveling up the leadership in the world, and I think that just makes people better people and helps them have better networks in the long run. So
absolutely.
Thank you for your time today.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Frank. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.